In this session, we're going to look at data entry within the transportation form for all trans software. From the main menu, after you log in, we're going to click on Trans, Claim, Entry, and Payroll. That will open up the main transportation form. We're going to start by entering in the first patient ID up in the insurance number search field. Now if we enter in an ID number, click in Tab. If the number exists in the database, the client info box would populate with the client demographic as well as the most recent trip or the previous trip that was added. In this case, the insurance number doesn't exist, so you're being asked if you want to add this client. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. We start out by putting in the client's name. We're going to start with last name, comma and space. So in between the last and the first name, we need to put a comma and a space, and then the first name. I'm going to hit Tab. We got to select the payer, and you can click on the drop down to see a list of all the payers available. The elderly waiver checkbox applies mainly to Medica members, and that's typically indicated on the Medica fax that you receive. I'm going to tab through, and that's going to bring us to the next field until I get to phone number, telephone. I'm going to enter in the telephone number of the member, date of birth. I'm going to go and add the gender as well as the street address, apartment number if it applies, city and state. If you click on Get Zip, the system will go out and identify the zip code for you. Once we hit Tab, it also populates in the county. If you have the MA number for the client, you can certainly add that at this time. And then finally, the resident type defaults with a value of R for residence, but you can modify that. And really the only other option typically for a member's residence would either be N or R. An N would indicate that they live in a group home or a long-term care facility or a skilled nursing facility. In this example, I'm going to leave it set to residence, and then I'm going to save the record. Now you'll notice once the record's saved is in the client info box, all the demographic information is now populated. If you need to make a change, you can click on Edit Client, and it will go into the client record, and you can modify any of the fields in here. Also notice for STS clients that we have a box for CON, Certificate of Need, and the expiration, so you could track those. We have the ability to add a trip note, and that note would only pertain to this one trip that we're entering. Any notes entered in will be viewable by the driver. Client notes any notes that are entered into this field will be applied to each and every trip that's entered into the system for this client. So if it's something that applies to every trip, enter it in here. And the driver will also have access to these notes as well. We also have the ability to enter an alternative address for the client. Many times we see that clients get picked up from one location and dropped off at an alternative location. So if I click on View Edit Alternate, we can then type in that address. You have the ability to specify a unique phone number for that alternative address if you'd like, as well as type in some notes related to that alternative address. And finally, the ability to identify the type of residence. The next step is to move over to the pickup location. The default is the client's address that you typed in. You now have the ability to identify the alternate as the pickup, as well as a clinic. So in the clinic search box, you can type in 200, for example, and it will pull up any clinic address with 200 within the address. So for example, here this is station 200, that's why it's on the list. 2001 has 200 in it, that's why it's showing up. If the clinic that you're looking for is in the list, you simply just select it. If it's not in the list, up in the top center of the screen, you can click on Add New Clinic. You have to give the clinic a unique name. If you type in, for example, Walgreens, yes, that you add maybe the first part of the address or a Walgreens store number, as there are several Walgreens within one city potentially, but our system only allows the physician or clinic name to be unique. So I'm going to add a clinic now. The phone number is optional. If the clinic happens to be a methadone location, you can flag that, as we have some reporting on methadone clinics if you want to utilize that. And then finally, the type of clinic. The default is P for physician's office, but you have a few options to choose from. And I'll go through a few of these. As an example, a pharmacy would be tied with D for diagnostic. Obviously, a hospital would be labeled with an H. Freestanding ERSD facility would be a freestanding dialysis clinic. But for this example, we're going to stick with physician's office. And then I'm going to add this clinic. And then if I go and search, I can now find it on the list here and make that selection. So we're going to stick with using the client home as the pickup, and we're going to use our newly added clinic as the destination. If you happen to know at the time of data entry if this is a multiple rider scenario, so multiple clients being picked up at the same location, you can identify the number of riders at that time. The payer will be populated based on the selection that you chose during the entry. Then we're going to move down to the auth field. You have to put in the authorization number in the appropriate field based on the payer. So really any insurance company other than UCare or MTM would have their authorization number, their trip authorization number entered into this field. Again, if it's a UCare trip, you'd enter it into the HR box. If it's an MTM entry, it would go here. The rep ID pertains to Medica TripEntry, and the value that gets typed into here is also available on the Medica fax. You can indicate the number of passengers that the driver should expect. So if a member is bringing a family member along, you can indicate 2 number of passengers. There's a series of check boxes down here, and we'll go through that with a later trip. The next step would be to mileage calc. So we send these addresses to Google Maps and return the shortest distance in terms of mileage. If the mileage calc returns a 0, this 0 miles checkbox will flag itself. We then move over to the times. We want to type in a scheduled pickup time. So I'm putting it in 10:30 a.m. We also want to indicate the date of the trip. And then in the scroll bar here in blue is the appointment time. So we'll put 11 o'clock. I always look up here as a confirmation as what to expect in terms of the date and the time. So this is saying the date of the trip is July 24th and 11 a.m. is the appointment time. Now if I do nothing else than save this trip, the system is designed to create the return leg for you. So the system will create the round trip for you. We do have the option over under trip leg and details to choose a one-way trip or multiple destinations, but we'll go through that with the next session. I'm going to save this trip. And then if you notice here, it shows up down in the list, and it's entered as a round trip and ready for scheduling to a driver. That concludes this session. We'll pick up again with one-way trips and multiple destination trips on the next session.